Hello friends, my name is Mr. Explains, and according to an ancient Greek legend one day, the king of the present-day Egyptian city of Thebes received a prophecy. The prophecy stated that when his son, Oedipus, would become king, he would kill his father and marry his mother. Fearing this prophecy, Oedipus's father decided to abandon him in the wilderness. However, fortunately or unfortunately, a couple found him and adopted him. As Oedipus grew older, he somehow learned about the prophecy, and to prevent it, he left his home in anger, unaware that the prophecy was about his biological parents. His anger eventually escalated, and one day, when he had a minor argument with a man on the road, in his rage, he killed the man and later married his wife. But friends, do you know who that man was? In reality, the man he killed was his real father, and the woman he married was none other than his biological mother. In other words, while trying to escape the prophecy, Oedipus ended up fulfilling it, which shows that you cannot escape your history or your future. This makes me wonder, is everything that happens in our lives pre-programmed or predetermined, like in a simulation? In the 3rd century, a philosopher named Zhuangzhou had a dream in which he saw himself as a butterfly. But when he woke up, he was left with 2 questions. Was he truly Zhuangzhou who had dreamed of being a butterfly? Or was he a butterfly dreaming that he was Zhuangzhou? This is where the conflict between simulation and reality began, raising questions about whether we truly have free will, or if everything is preset and predetermined. Free will means the actions we take by our own choice. For example, if I decide to pick up my phone and I do so, I have acted on my free will, right? But wait, think about it for a moment in this context. There must have been a reason behind my decision to pick up the phone, right? This means that some events influenced me to pick up the phone, and this is what is called determinism. Determinism suggests that current events are based on past events, and all physical events are deterministic. Let me explain with a simple example. Imagine a ball passing in front of you. It's obvious that the ball didn't move on its own. Someone must have hit it. So when that person hit the ball, was it really an act of free will? The person must have thrown the ball when a match was happening, and the match happened because someone organized it, and so on. We can trace a chain of cause and effect, which suggests that the act of hitting the ball was already predetermined. As soon as the ball was hit, our brain's multiple states transformed into a single state. Now the brain state is nothing but a biological state. And since we have established that all physical states are deterministic, we too are deterministic. This is because determinism suggests that we don't actually control our actions. We merely experience them. According to scientists, this can only happen if we are living in a simulation. The Greek philosopher Plato also proved this by suggesting that what we perceive as reality is actually a projected reality. He demonstrated this with his theory of the allegory of the cave, in which he explained that what our senses perceive, our subconscious mind considers as reality. The subconscious mind is the part of our brain that makes instant decisions without conscious thought. It even controls essential functions for our survival, such as heartbeat and blood circulation. So if you can learn to control this powerful subconscious mind, it can help you achieve whatever you want. Let's get back to our topic. Plato's theory was that the reality we perceive is just a shadow of the true reality, much like the shadows cast on the wall of a cave. According to Plato, our senses are limited, and the reality we perceive is not the true reality. However, since this was a philosophical concept and lacked scientific proof, many people dismissed it. But some researchers and scientists took this concept seriously and started working on mathematically proving it. In fact, British mathematician John Conway even created a game called The Game of Life to demonstrate this concept. It was a simple game where you only needed to set an initial pattern, and the game would automatically run, generating different patterns. Over time, as many generations of patterns were created, the initial pattern would disappear, and the remaining patterns would continue the cycle. According to John, perhaps something similar is happening with us. If we consider atoms as the smallest unit, they too multiply and create patterns, one of which is us today. But friends, this observation, while interesting, lacked solid evidence to prove that we are living in a simulation. To understand this on a smaller scale with more concrete evidence, quantum mechanics entered the picture. Quantum mechanics, at a fundamental level, has shown that we might be living in a simulation, demonstrated by the double-slit experiment. Many of you might already be familiar with this experiment. But let me explain it at a basic level. It's a simple experiment that gives very strange results. Light passing through a double slit forms an interference pattern on the screen behind it. We know that when the crest of one wave overlaps with the trough of another, dark spots are created. And when the crests or troughs of both waves overlap, bright spots are created. So far, everything is fine because waves form interference patterns. But if I reduce the intensity of the light so much that only one photon passes through each slit at a time, we should see a particle pattern, right? Because a photon is a particle, and particles don't create interference patterns like waves. But strangely, even in this case, an interference pattern appears. The weirdness of this experiment doesn't stop there. When detectors are placed in front of the slits to observe the particles, the interference pattern collapses, and the photons behave like particles. To understand why this happens, scientists conducted an experiment and discovered that, in the quantum world, future events affect past events. Simply put, the past depends on the future, which breaks causality. Scientists then conducted another experiment to explain this causality breaking. The setup was similar to the double slit experiment, but they added a beam splitter and a lens. Using the beam splitter, scientists split the photons into two paths. One path went through the lens and reached the screen, while the other path went to two detectors. But in this experiment, the detectors were placed in such a way that the photons on the first path reached the screen before the photons on the second path reached the detectors. When they passed the photons through the double slit, the first path of photons created an interference pattern on the screen. But when the second path of photons reached the detectors, the interference pattern collapsed into a particle pattern. This experiment proved that at the quantum level, when observed, light shifts from its low-energy wave state to a particle state, much like in a video game. To understand this, consider the game GTA 5. When you start the game, the entire map isn't rendered at once because it's not computationally feasible. The graphics processor doesn't render the parts of the game world that the player isn't looking at. It only renders the part visible on the player's screen, while the rest of the world remains unrendered. But as soon as the player moves towards an unrendered part, meaning observes it, that part gets rendered instantly, just like the observation of photons in the double slit experiment. Friends, I don't know if it's a coincidence or what, but the similarity between the double slit experiment and video games is quite fascinating, don't you think? Let me know in the comments. This might mean we are indeed in a simulation. Interestingly, another piece of evidence for this is the constant speed of light. Well, every computer has a limited information transfer speed, which we call the CPU's clock speed. By this logic, our universe also has a limited information transfer speed, the speed of light. So does this mean our entire universe is a giant CPU, and everything in it is a projected simulation? Or maybe not. Because friends, if we look at the mathematics, simulating a single quantum particle's spin would require 50 GB of RAM. Calculating for just a few particles, spins would require more computer memory than there are atoms in the universe, meaning simulating spins at the quantum level is nearly impossible. But friends, what do you think about it? Let us know in the comments. Moreover, you can subscribe our channel for such interesting topics, because it takes really effort to make such videos, so your one like and subscribe would be really helpful. Also, thanks for watching and stay